So I grew up near Prescott, which is a market town about 9 miles east of Liverpool. There's a large acute general hospital called Wiston Hospital, which my parents' house is near. The reason I mention that is that I do think that's related to what I'm about to tell you. Just to the north of the hospital is a small municipal park called Henley Park. The sort of locals don't call it that. It's always called either Wiston Park or sometimes the Flower Park.
Okay.
Nowadays it's sort of it's for sort of children's play area. It's not very big. It's probably 200 meters by 200 meters. Nothing really remarkable, but I saw something in that park about 30 years ago that I've never really been able to explain. So this goes back to about 1997. It was, I think one thing I beat myself up over about this account is that I can never remember exactly the date this happened, but it was late October, early November 1997, right. And the clocks had gone back. It was getting dark early in the evening, and essentially I was in the garden. I was probably about 11 or 12 years old at this point, and it'd been a very, very wet day. And it's quite funny how certain things of this evening stick in my mind. And I remember there was wet leaves on the floor, and the brown leaves were sort of stuck to the garden path, you know. And I was in the back garden playing football with a mate of mine, and it'd been raining pretty much all day, and it was just starting to ease off. And I was a 12-year-old lad who was full of energy and wanted to get out and kick the ball around the garden, you know. Yeah. And I remember my parents were in the kitchen, and there was just enough. It was getting dark, and there was just enough light spilling out from the kitchen window into the garden that provided just enough illumination for us to see what we were doing, which was just kicking the ball around the garden. And my mum's garden used to back onto this park, which I mentioned earlier. And at the bottom of my parents' garden was a set of railings which sort of divided the garden to the park. Right. And as we were kicking this ball about, my pal kicks the ball down the other end of the garden, and I go to retrieve it. So I go to pick the ball up and carry on the game. And as I stand up, something catches my eye. And I sort of trained my focus, and I could see what looked like, and I thought it was at first someone in fancy dress, actually. It looked like a bride at first glance. And I think what was most unusual about it was this park has no lighting. It's secluded, and it's surrounded on one half of it, surrounded on three sides by large oak trees, and it's fairly hard to see. But one thing I noticed about this figure I could see, which is probably 50 yards away, so it wasn't close, was how bright it was. It was incredibly white. It stood out like almost as if it was shining. And I looked at it, and when I trained my eyes on it, I realised it wasn't a bride. It was a woman dressed in this pure, brilliant white with a shawl over her head. Her face was completely concealed, and what I would describe as a full, almost like a frock, like an old Victorian outfit, which basically touched the floor. And I thought, that's a really strange thing to see at this time in a park. Now, that park now is open 24/7, but in the 90s it used to be closed. It used to be locked at one end, and there was one end left open all night near the fire station entrance.
Okay.
So in those days, nobody went in there. In fact, the only the park was considered sort of the only thing you'd associate it with is kind of nefarious activity,
Yeah.
And the last thing you'd expect to see is sort of a woman on her own. And then as I'm looking, I realise she's actually pushing a pram.
Oh.
And the pram is also in this pure, brilliant white that really stood out. Otherwise, it wouldn't have caught my attention at all.
Yeah.
So I'm stood there completely motionless, looking at this thing, and it's moving as I'm looking at it from in a left to right direction. And I think the other thing that I noticed that it was moving slowly, almost like drifting, and I couldn't see any movement in the arms, in the legs. It was like her feet were not touching the floor. And I watched this for about 15 seconds, and then my pal who I was playing football with joined me, and I said, I pointed, "What's that?" And just as I said that, it moved behind like an outhouse, which it's a cafe now, but in those days it was a disused toilet block that was permanently locked.
Okay.
It moved behind that, and I said, just watch. I was telling my pal, just watch to see if it comes out the other side. And I thought, knowing my luck, it won't, but it did, and he was able to see it for about 5 seconds before it moved behind some trees.
Oh.
So I was glad that he could see it, and we were kids, and I said, "What would you think that was?" And he didn't respond. He just quietly said, "Yeah, I'm starting to get scared now." So we ran back into my parents and told them what I'd just seen, and I can't remember exactly what response I got, but it was probably something like, "Don't be so bloody stupid, it's just someone's dressed up,"
Yeah, parents back in those days, it probably was something like that. Yeah.
So I've never really been able to. I think about it probably on a weekly basis. What was it? Was it someone dressed up? But if so, why would they be walking around in a pram on a horrible night in cold, blustery conditions, on their own? I just can't really believe that. And then the reason I mentioned the Wiston Hospital earlier is because, having done a little bit of research, and I don't claim whatsoever to be any kind of expert on this, but the history of the hospital is rather interesting. It was considered a acute general hospital from the 40s. It's a big hospital. It's got about 1,000 beds in there nowadays. Before that, it was an infirmary from around the 20s. But before that, it was a poorhouse.
Okay.
And those places were pretty grim places. And it was, from what I understand, and there's probably people listening in who know more about this than I do, but these were for the destitute, and I understand that families who really had nothing or couldn't work would go to these places, and the families would be split up. They were, the last call, if you, and I guess people who couldn't work, whether if they were physically disabled or mentally unwell, would end up in these places. And what I found out was, from a local historical society website, that the people in these places wore uniforms. Actually, they were actually referred to as inmates, which is,
yes, they were. Actually,
it sounds like almost like a prison type system,
Yeah.
And I found out that actually the women wore white full length overall frocks with shawls. Now, it just made me wonder: is there some kind of link there between what I saw that night, which absolutely fits that description,
and is right across the road, isn't it? I'm looking at it on a map now.
It's 100 yards.
Yeah, it's right there. Yeah.
So I've never really been able to explain that. Other than, and I think what's even more frustrating about it is I probably didn't breathe a word about it for years, and then maybe about 8 years later, the same lad who I was with that night, I said, "Do you remember that thing we saw?" and he said, "I have no idea what you're talking about."
Really?
And he couldn't remember it. Now, I know some people who go through very, let's say, stressful things in their life. You can compartmentalize things and shut it out. That does happen now. Whether that's, but I think because of his lack of recollection, I've never really mentioned it to anybody because my sort of proof
nothing to
vanished.
back you up. Yeah,
exactly. So anyway, that's I just wanted to come on and sort of share that. And, I think the area is quite interesting. There's I had a book by Jay Brooks, I think is the surname Brooks is the author, and it was like a gazetteer of hauntings and paranormal activities. And actually, in that book, which was, I probably picked that up in the early 2000s, is an account of a ghost on Delph Lane, which runs directly east of where this park is. But that talks about a sailor who fell to his death in a quarry, which is probably, again, 50 to 100 yards from where I saw. And I don't think there's any link, but it goes to show and goes to sort of alludes back to what one of your earlier callers are some places more haunted than others. And
yes, that's right. Yeah.
I thought you had a wonderful story about Apple Tree Wick, which a couple of weeks ago.
Oh wow!
Which just seems to be full of unusual activity. So
there is more on that I can't wait to tell everybody about. But yes, that's it is good. So I'm looking at Delph Lane now. So were you on the side, because I know it's different now, but the trees all around it, were you on the opposite side to Delph Lane then?
Exactly.
Right where all those trees are. Yeah, look at that. You had a clear, straight line to it, didn't you? Nothing in the way that you could have mistaken. Nothing like that. Wow.
Yeah, it's just one of those things of, like I said, that all the other explanations I just can't accept them, people dressed up and
because why?
I just don't know. I just don't know why, especially, and it looked like a woman. I can't verify it, but it looked like, and especially with the pram and the clothes and the shape, it was quite tall. I'd say she was sort of 5 foot, 5'10", 5'11". It wasn't like a small. It was, and she was very thin, and I can sort of picture it clearly in my head what I saw that night. Yeah,
and I think the glowing aspect, the sort of the shimmering aspect of it.
The pram was the same. It was this pure, brilliant white, and as I said, it wasn't a pram you'd see today. It was like an old perambulator, which is where the word comes from. These big steel, it looked like big steel wheels. Something from a real anachronism, something from another time,
another world. Wow,
never seen anything like it before or since.
No, and you're probably glad of that, I imagine. But but you kind of want to see it again as well, don't you? It's sort of
every time I go past there, I always look in and nothing there. But anyway, there you go.
Long gone. Well, thank you ever so much for that call. That's fabulous. Thanks for
all the best.
Telling us that. Thank you. Cheerio.
Bye bye.